Why is it that our minds seem to have this uncanny ability to replay the same thoughts over and over again? What is it about overthinking that keeps us stuck in that endless loop of worry and doubt? Is it just a quirk of our brains, or is there something more to it? Well, it might feel like an unstoppable force, but here's the thing. There's actually a lot we can do to break free from overthinking. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, replaying that awkward conversation you had earlier in the day? Or maybe you're stressing over a decision, turning it around in your mind, until it feels like you'll never find the right answer. It happens to all of us, and it's more common than you might think. You see, our brains are wired to solve problems, but sometimes when there's no clear solution, they get stuck, looping over the same thoughts without getting anywhere. But here's the good news. There are simple tricks we can use to quiet those overactive minds. And if you're curious to learn how, you're in the right place. Let's dive into 10 psychological tricks to stop overthinking everything. Ready to give your brain a little vacation? Let's get started. Tip number 1. Practice the 3 W's technique. Our minds love to wander into every possible scenario. Past, present, future, you name it. The 3 W's technique is like a map to help navigate that mental maze. Ask yourself, what am I thinking about? Identify the specific thought that's got you spinning. Then ask, why am I thinking this? Get to the root of why this thought has taken center stage. Finally, what now? Decide on the next actionable step, if any, that you can take. And here's a little secret. Sometimes just identifying the thought and understanding why it's there can make it lose its grip. Give it a try next time your mind is running wild. It's like giving your brain a GPS, guiding it out of the overthinking fog. Now that we've got a map, let's talk about the mindset that will keep us moving forward. Tip number 2. Adopt a good enough mindset. We've all been there, trying to make the perfect decision, find the perfect words, or craft the perfect plan. But here's the truth. Perfection is a myth. It's like chasing a rainbow. You never quite get there. So, instead of aiming for perfect, aim for good enough. This mindset shift can be a game changer. Done is better than perfect. And most of the time, good enough really is good enough. It takes the pressure off and helps you move forward without getting stuck in analysis paralysis. Imagine you're working on a project. Whether it's writing an email, preparing a presentation, or even deciding what to cook for dinner. If you find yourself overthinking every detail, remind yourself that it doesn't have to be flawless. It just has to be finished. But what if you're still struggling to get started? That's where our next tip comes in. Tip number 3, use the 5-minute rule. Ever notice how starting something is often the hardest part? That's where the 5-minute rule comes in handy. The idea is simple. Commit to working on whatever you're overthinking about for just 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes? Why does this work? Because getting started is usually the biggest hurdle. Once you're in the groove, you'll often find it easier to keep going. And even if you don't, hey, at least you've done 5 minutes of it. That's progress. So next time you're overthinking that big task on your to-do list, just tell yourself, I'll give it 5 minutes. You might be surprised how much you can get done, or how much your anxiety decreases once you've actually started. And sometimes, when the mind just won't quit, it helps to shift focus entirely. Here's how. Tip number 4. Engage in creative outlets. When the mind won't stop buzzing, sometimes the best thing you can do is give it something else to focus on. Something fun, something creative. Engaging in creative outlets like drawing, writing, or playing music can be a fantastic way to break the cycle of overthinking. It's like giving your brain a little vacation. And here's the cool part. While you're busy creating, your mind is too occupied to dwell on those repetitive thoughts. Plus, you might end up with a cool piece of art, a new song, or even just a journal entry that helps you process your thoughts in a new way. So next time you're stuck in an overthinking loop, grab a pencil, a guitar, or a paintbrush and let your creativity take over. You might just find that those nagging thoughts have taken a back seat by the time you're done. Speaking of focus, let's talk about avoiding the trap of information overload. Tip number 5, limit information intake. Ever fall down a rabbit hole of research when trying to make a decision? Before you know it, you've got 25 tabs open, and your brain is swimming in a sea of conflicting information. Sound familiar? This is where limiting information intake can be a lifesaver. The more information you consume, the harder it becomes to make a decision. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Too much, too fast, and it's overwhelming. Instead, set some boundaries. Decide on a set number of sources or a time limit for your research, and stick to it. For example, if you're shopping for a new gadget, choose 3 trusted reviews and leave it at that. Or if you're preparing for a presentation, give yourself an hour to gather the facts and then move on. Limiting your intake helps you avoid drowning in details and keeps you focused on what's really important. Now, once you've gathered your information, it's time to make a decision. But how can you avoid getting stuck in endless deliberation? Here's a tip. Tip number 6. Set time limits for decision-making. Now, speaking of limits, here's another trick. Set a time limit for making decisions. When you give yourself a deadline, you're less likely to get stuck in the endless cycle of what-ifs. Imagine you're deciding on a new hobby. Instead of spending days or weeks mulling it over, set a timer for 10 minutes and make your choice when it goes off. The deadline forces you to weigh your options quickly and efficiently, cutting down on unnecessary overthinking. And here's the bonus. The more you practice this, the more confident you'll become in your decision-making skills. It's like building a muscle. Each time you do it, you get a little stronger, a little faster. But what if you catch yourself spiraling into overthinking? Here's a simple yet powerful technique. Tip number 7. Utilize the stop technique. Let's talk about something simple but powerful. The stop technique? It's exactly what it sounds like. When you catch yourself overthinking, mentally or even verbally, say stop. This technique helps break the cycle of negative thoughts before they spiral out of control. Think of it as a reset button for your brain. You're not just stopping the thought, you're also taking a moment to refocus your mind on something more positive or productive. It's like slamming on the brakes before your mind veers off into overthinking territory. So next time you feel those thoughts creeping in, just say stop and shift your focus. Whether it's to a simple task, a deep breath, or even a quick walk around the block, you'll find that taking control of your thoughts can be easier than you think. And speaking of control, let's move on to a more structured approach to changing the way you think. Tip number 8, cognitive restructuring. Here's a more technical term, but it's a game changer. Cognitive restructuring. It's a fancy way of saying change the way you think. This technique comes straight from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and involves identifying and challenging those irrational thoughts that fuel overthinking. For instance, let's say you're convinced you messed up that presentation at work. Instead of letting that thought spiral, write it down. Then ask yourself, is this thought based on facts, or am I jumping to conclusions? Challenge it by looking at the evidence. Often, you'll find that those thoughts aren't as solid as they seem, and by reframing them into something more balanced and realistic, you can break free from the overthinking loop. But sometimes, all we need is a moment of mindfulness to reset our thoughts. Tip number 9, practice mindfulness. The Swiss Army knife of mental health techniques. Mindfulness is all about staying present in the moment, fully engaging with what's happening right now, rather than getting lost in thoughts of the past or future. And here's where it gets really interesting. Combining mindfulness with physical activity can supercharge its effects. Ever tried mindful walking? It's like meditation on the go. Focus on the rhythm of your steps, the feel of the ground beneath your feet, the air on your skin. This not only grounds you in the present, but also gives your mind and body a break from overthinking. Next time your mind starts to spiral, take a few minutes to focus on your breath, a simple task, or even a short walk. You'll be amazed at how quickly those racing thoughts start to slow down. Finally, let's wrap things up with a simple practice that can shift your mindset entirely. Tip number 10, practice gratitude journaling. When was the last time you took a moment to appreciate the good things in life? Gratitude journaling is a simple yet powerful way to shift your focus from what's wrong to what's right. And guess what? It's also a fantastic way to combat overthinking. By regularly writing down things you're thankful for, you train your brain to focus on the positive. It's like rewiring your mental circuitry. And here's the kicker. The more you focus on gratitude, the less room there is for overthinking. So, set aside a few minutes each day, maybe in the morning or before bed, and jot down 3 things you're grateful for. It could be as simple as a good cup of coffee, a sunny day, or a kind word from a friend. Over time, this practice can help create a more positive, overthinking-resistant mindset. Before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to acknowledge something important. Overthinking is something we all struggle with at times. It's part of being human. Our brains are wired to analyze, predict, and sometimes worry. But the key is not to let those thoughts take over. Remember, it's not about shutting down your thoughts completely. That's impossible and not the goal. Instead, it's about learning to manage those thoughts, to guide them, and to prevent them from controlling your life. It's about finding that balance where you can think things through without getting stuck in a loop. And let's be real, some days will be better than others. Some days, overthinking will win, and that's okay. The important thing is that you have these tools in your toolkit, ready to help you steer your mind back on track whenever you need them. So whether it's the stop technique, a bit of gratitude journaling, or simply reminding yourself that good enough really is good enough, these tips are here to help you find peace of mind in a noisy world. And there we have it, 10 psychological tricks to stop overthinking everything. Hope you found these tips helpful and that you'll give some of them a try the next time your mind starts to go into overdrive. If you enjoyed this video and want more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a comment below. What works for you when you find yourself overthinking? Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of your mind and keep it light.